Hi everyone, welcome to our final talk of the day. Last but most certainly not least, we have Max with us today. So Max worked as a senior clinical psychologist at a general hospital in Singapore for 6 years prior to joining us here at Annabelle AKIDS and Annabelle Psychology. He has a lot of experience in helping adults with depression, anxiety disorders, adjustment disorder, personality disorder, bipolar, OCD, PTSD, and others. He is also an experienced mindfulness practitioner and has received training in teaching mindfulness from the Oxford Mindfulness Centre. So today, Max will be sharing with us more on overcoming gaming addiction. There he is, ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. It's the last webinar for the day. So I heard that some of you were here in the morning, and some of you might still be here. It's real dedication. I'm gonna assume that we just share my screen first. Okay. Right. So I'm gonna assume most of you are parents here today. It's clear that all of you attending here today are parents who really care about your children really deeply. If you're a teenager who's kind of been dragged to attend and listen to me, hi, nice to meet you. So let's talk a little bit about gaming addiction. All right, which I'm sure is a concern for us. All right, and this is my agenda for the talk today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is gaming addiction, how to identify it. I'm going to talk about the things commonly found in people with gaming addiction, right? And then importantly, we're going to talk a little bit about overcoming gaming addiction. So we're talking about like the strategies that you parents can take to help your parents with these things. Then I'll also be talking a little bit about psychotherapy, how a psychologist can help with your teen who is having difficulties kind of getting off their gaming. They might be kind of gaming too much. All right. So clearly, gaming is a part of life nowadays, especially for teens growing up and children growing up nowadays. Nowadays, teenagers are born over the games they play together. Teens are equally likely to be found hanging up at a mall or hanging out online, kind of completing quests together, doing a game, playing a game together. And these games can be very addictive, particularly MMORPGs, right? Like World of Warcraft or RuneScape. And these game companies have like whole teams of employees studying how to drive user engagement, getting often and trying to find a way to get their gamers to come back, to stay in. They have these kind of special events, special rewards, and special kind of items that gamers can get when they join the event, right? So really, the game companies would like to have more gaming addicts because that just is better for their bottom line. And obviously, this is becoming more and more of a concern. I recall like a horror story of this teen, I think in China, who was in an internet cafe for like more than 24 hours and then died at the table, which is a real horror story. But that's a really extreme case. But let's talk a little bit about what are like the in-betweens and what might kind of lead to that. Yeah. So how do we identify gaming addiction, right? So, and we can do this by perhaps kind of thinking a little bit about your child and asking yourself these questions about your child, right? So perhaps like, does your child spend most of his time playing or thinking about playing a game, right? So perhaps they're like, maybe they even at dinner time, they're asking for their meals to be had in front of the computer, or if they come for dinner, they're like in for like 5 minutes and then boom, they're back into playing their games, right? And even when they're not playing, Perhaps they're thinking about the games, texting their friends about the games. Basically, the game becomes the main thing in their life. Second question, did your child spend increasing amounts of time on games? Perhaps they started with like 30 minutes a day, and then over a few months, that kind of became 6, 8, 10 hours a day. And so that could be a sign of addiction as well. Does your child, third question, does your child play games to forget about life? Right? Perhaps they might be having some difficulties in their lives, and they play games because it just provides them a way to escape, right? To just forget about their difficulties, right? Have you tried unsuccessfully to reduce their gaming? Kind of talking to them about like trying to persuade them to reduce their games, but then sometimes that leads to them saying no, or perhaps it leads to like conflicts between you and your child, which obviously kind of makes it really difficult for you to connect with your child. All right. Fifth question, does your child feel stressed, low, or anxious when they're unable to play? All right, so perhaps this might be a sign of withdrawal symptoms. When they're unable to play, they start to feel look a bit more tense and antsy. And then for some reason, when they're playing, they look like a lot more relaxed and having fun. Could be a sign of addiction as well. All right. Second last question. Have you had fights with your child about their time spent on games? So trying to reduce it, trying to talk to them about reducing it, focusing on spending their time doing other things leads to arguments, leads to quarrels, which can be very, very unpleasant. Last question, has your child neglected other important activities to play games? So for example, perhaps they could be neglecting their studies, they could be obviously losing sleep because of the games, right? Different things like that kind of they end up doing more of. That perhaps they used to enjoy going for like CCAs, playing sports, playing football, but then they're spending less time on that and focusing more time on the gaming. All right, so ask yourself these kind of questions. And if your child if you said yes to like 4 out of 7 of these questions, then there is a good chance that your child's gaming might be a little bit more of a problem. Yeah. Okay. So internet gaming disorder, this is a proposed disorder to be listed in the DSM-5. The DSM-5 is this very technical manual created by the American Psychiatric Association, right? And it's a large manual of many different mental health disorders that a person can be diagnosed with. So internet gaming disorder is a proposed disorder. It's not an official disorder yet. But it kind of provides us another way to kind of identify whether or not your child might be having a problem. Okay, so what it is the persistent and recurrent use of the internet to engage in games, often with other players, leading to a clinically significant impairment or distress as indicated by 5 or more of the following in a 12-month period. Okay, this is a very, very long thing, but basically going to look at the symptoms and we think about your child in the last year, all right, whether or not they meet some of this criteria. Okay, so the first one, starting on the left, preoccupation with internet games. All right, so again, this is them about kind of thinking about the game a lot and thinking about when they can next play. Maybe when they're not playing, they're strategizing how to beat the next quest. All right. In the middle, withdrawal symptoms when the internet gaming is taken away. So maybe when they're not able to game, they get a bit more irritated, more anxious. Perhaps they might also kind of feel sad. Lastly, on the right, tolerance, right? So this is like the need to spend increasing amounts of times engaged in games. Like I said, like I mentioned just now, kind of they started with 30 minutes and then now it's like 8 hours, which is obviously a lot lah. Yeah. Okay. Ken, so more kind of symptoms associated that can be found in internet gaming disorder. Unsuccessful attempts by you to control their participation in internet games. You try to like persuade them to reduce it and it didn't work, and it just got harder and harder. In the middle, so secondly, it's about a loss of interest in previous hobbies, maybe and entertainment. Maybe they used to enjoy watching movies, playing football, but then now when a game came along, that was the only thing that they wanted to do. All right. And lastly, on the right, continued excessive use of internet games, despite they knowing that their internet games might be like getting in the way of them doing the things that they want to do, doing well at their school, is getting in the way of their stuff, of their relationships with you, relationships with their friends, and things like that. But they will just choose to game still. All right. So more symptoms also in internet gaming disorder. They've deceived family members, therapists, regarding how often they're gaming. Maybe you come home and then they tell you, I only play computer games for an hour, but then you find out later that they actually spend 4, 5, 6 hours of the day playing computer games, right? They could be using the games as a way to escape or relieve the negative mood. So again, like I mentioned just now, like suddenly when they're playing, they're looking happier, but when they're not playing, they look more down or a bit more tense. All right. Lastly, has kind of really just made a significant relationship quite difficult for them, or perhaps they've lost a significant relationship. Perhaps it could be with you, or it could be with a girlfriend or boyfriend. If your child is already a young adult, perhaps it might be getting in the way of their career. Definitely it could get in the way of their education and things like that because of these internet games. Putting that first ahead of more important things like their job, their relationships, and their school. Okay, so right, so clearly, right, internet gaming disorder or gaming addiction is something that's really quite important, and that I mean, obviously that's why you guys are here, because this is a real concern for kids and teenagers nowadays, right? So biopsychosocial factors associated with gaming addiction, and another big word, but basically it's the biological, psychological, and social factors that are commonly seen in people with gaming addiction, right? And it's important to note that a lot of these factors are determined via correlation, which means that these factors can both be causes and or consequences of gaming addiction, right? And so meaning we don't know which comes first, the gaming addiction or some of these factors, okay? But definitely these are factors that you can look out for in your children to determine how and whether or not their gaming may be excessive, and it may be starting to affect their lives, and also perhaps also looking into what could be causing or contributing to the gaming addiction as well. All right. So we'll start with the biological factors. Basically, these are things that are changes in the brain. And gaming addicts, they've got brains that have been found to have significant differences in relation to other normal people. So again, starting from the left to right, gaming addicts' brains, there was increased gray matter in areas associated with reward and addiction, right? So basically what this kind of means is that they were getting more excitement, more stimulation from the game than most other people, right? And this will kind of make them crave things more, right? And then when these kind of cravings, these kind of needs are not met, their emotion can get quite volatile as well, right? So this would mean they're also easily addicted to other things that can perhaps provide a quick short-term stimulation that feels good, right? So then in the middle, due to their long hours, there's an increased connectivity in their kind of their perception of their senses, their ability to process space, process kind of movement, all right? So they tend to be faster, better in that than most other people due to honestly the long hours of the gaming, right? Unfortunately, though, the addiction is also so associated with decreased gray matter in the brain, all right, in areas associated with motivation, self-control, and inhibition, all right? Basically, the ability to hold yourself back from doing something because it might be socially inappropriate or unhelpful, right? So this is obviously very important aspects in achieving their long-term success, right? So if your child is suddenly behaving like a different person, It might be because, well, because of their excessive gaming, the long hours of gaming, their brains are changing in significant ways, right? But again, it's important for us to remember that even though their brains might have changed, if we can overcome the gaming addiction, their brains can start changing again in more helpful directions. Okay. So moving on to psychological factors. What's interesting is that the first is that there seems to be a significant relationship between ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, all right, and gaming. And researchers, though, still can't really determine which one kind of comes first. It might be that people with ADHD, they can use gaming because it helps them to really focus their mind, because gaming provides them with a very highly stimulating environment. So it helps them to focus their busy minds, which can be quite calming for people with ADHD. At the same time, though, because these kind of gaming environments are really kind of stimulating, and they're very different from real life situations, which means they might have a difficulty paying attention, and they might be feeling more restless when in real life situations, which can sometimes, yes, look like ADHD. Okay. So more psychological factors. Gaming addiction is associated with poorer psychological health. Basically, gaming addicts, they tend to have lower self-esteem, lower sense of confidence in themselves. They tend to be a little more dissatisfied with their lives. They tend to have higher stress levels. All right. Unfortunately, gaming addicts tend to have a higher suicide risk as well, which is obviously something that we must be very concerned about. And they might kind of have a loss of self-concept. And basically, a loss of self-concept is basically happens when a gamer starts to identify too much with their in-game character. All right, so start off really feeling and thinking as if they're the in-game character, and then it almost feels as if they're only alive, or they only feel alive when they're in the game. All right. Quite naturally, these kind of long hours of gaming lead to difficulties with their sleep. All right, so they tend to have less sleep. You might find your child staying up to secretly game, and that can really be a problem, because this can really impact our mental health. Very importantly, it might be starting to affect how well we're able to regulate our emotions, right? And it tends to be an emotion regulation. Basically, they're less able to manage their unpleasant emotions. They perhaps have a difficulty identifying their emotion. You ask them how they're feeling, they say, I don't know. But yet you can tell that they're perhaps angry, and maybe they're getting angrier and angrier, more and more anxious, but they can't really tell how they might actually be feeling, right? Gaming addicts, they tend to be have more difficulties managing their anger, right? They might also be more prone to aggression and hostility, right? And it is important to note that research has not kind of definitively determined whether gaming leads to aggression, only that they are associated with each other. It might be that people who are more prone to gaming or more prone to addiction might also be more prone to things like being like hostility and aggression, right? Well, the other things would happen also, it could also be that actually gaming could provide people with more aggression as a way to kind of vent some of these kind of urges. Okay? Yeah. Okay. If you guys got questions, feel free to kind of just leave it in the chat, and I'm sure Celine will help us out with that later. Okay? So don't worry, we'll answer all the questions later as well. Okay, so moving on with more psychological factors, gaming addiction is associated with more maladaptive or unhelpful negative personality traits, such as high neuroticism, which is the proneness to have more patterns of thought and more negative patterns of thinking, more negative patterns of emotions. And of course, and unfortunately, they also tend to have low grit, right? Which is the ability to be resilient and persevere, right? The ability to kind of get up even after you've been knocked down, right? And if you think about it, you can relate this to the brain changes related with motivation and self-control, because really those are very important things that help us to get up again after things like failure and rejection. Okay. Okay. Right. So moving on to social factors, things that are more related to relationships and how they operate in society, right? So starting from the left, people who are gaming addicts tend to have poorer family relationships. They tend to be more disconnected, or the family relationships within a family tend to be more disconnected. And it tends to be quite conflictual, meaning there are more kind of arguments and quarrels in the family environment. And this could be due to there are problems with the gaming or like disagreements about gaming, but it could also be that there might have been more conflicts in the child's family environment that can lead them to use gaming as a way to like escape, right? Secondly, gaming addicts tend to have experienced more adverse childhood experiences. So adverse childhood experiences are things like substance abuse in the family, things like domestic abuse, or perhaps just neglect, right? Not meeting their physical needs, not meeting their emotional needs. And interestingly, of course, adverse childhood experiences also make people more prone to things like drug addiction as well. So we can think about how like some of these difficulties that the child had like no control over, it just kind of happened to them, can also lead to them being more prone to gaming addiction. Right. Lastly, on the right, and not surprisingly, the parents of children who are gaming addicts or teenagers who are gaming addicts tend to be those who also have less parenting efficacy, which is basically the confidence in their ability to be a parent. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to kind of more social factors, things that are outside of the family. In terms of social relationships outside of the family, gaming addicts tend to have lesser social support from their peers. And unfortunately, they also tend to be a little bit more withdrawn from others as well, right? They might be shutting themselves in, avoiding other people. In the past, they used to kind of go out with their friends more often, but then suddenly when the game came along and the more time they spent gaming, the less they went out, the less they talked about their friends, texted their friends and things like that. It just became all about the game, right? And of course, naturally, they tend to feel a little bit more lonely than other teenagers, right? Not surprisingly, gaming addiction is also associated with poorer academic performance. The grades tend to be lower than teenagers who are not gaming addicts, right? Again, we must remember that this is correlation. It kind of makes sense that a child who's gaming more often would tend to have more poor grades, but the opposite can kind of happen as well. So for example, if a child is doing badly in school, it also means they would probably feel less confident at school. So they may kind of seek that source of confidence from other arenas, such as online games. All right. Okay. Give me a moment. Okay, so clearly, gaming addiction is not good, and we now know why. As a parent, these negative factors associated with gaming addiction are very concerning, and it obviously quite scary sometimes, especially things like higher suicide risk and things that we definitely do not want that for our children, or honestly any teenager or any person. Okay. But these kind of factors associated with gaming addiction, you can also maybe perhaps start sharing some of these things, some of these negative impacts of gaming, that you could share these with your teenager, your child, and educate them, right? In this way, your children can come to understand that you setting boundaries around their gaming, asking them about their gaming, monitoring their gaming, setting limits on how long they're playing. It's more about supporting their well-being than like just taking away their fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about overcoming addiction. We're going to talk a little bit about the things that you can do. All right, and then lastly, we'll talk a little bit more about things that psychologists can help with as well in terms of psychotherapy. Yeah. Okay, Ken. So in terms of strategies for parents, there are four main areas, and we'll describe these more in more detail in the next few slides. But firstly, it's about building the parent-child relationship, and this is the base on which we can really make a difference. Parental monitoring, right? Understanding their motivations behind their gaming. And then also importantly, as parents, providing alternative ways, alternative areas or things that they can do to meet some of their needs. Okay. Okay, right. So building on the parent-child relationship, as I mentioned earlier, all right, your relationship with your child is the foundation upon which you can make changes, you can advise and persuade your child to change their behavior, right? In a sense, you could think of this trust bank account idea. Basically, you want your relationship with your child to be as trusting, and they trust that you support them, right? You build up a strong kind of trust balance that you can withdraw on when you need to do things that they may not like, such as like telling them to get off the computer, telling them that to setting a limit of 2 hours a day. And if this trust bank account is healthy, your child will be able to accept that more easily. Basically, them knowing that you care, that you're really genuinely interested in their well-being. Okay, and how do we kind of grow this? I think this has been covered in earlier webinars, but really it's about, in essence, it's frequent expressions of warmth and affection, really showing to them that you love them, that you care for them, that you really are keen on helping them to be as well as possible, right? And not just in ways that are important to you, but also ways that are important to them, right? We do this by being consistently responsive to their needs, around be consistent and reliable when we respond to their needs. I'm going to share more positive emotions with them, being happy together with them, being excited together with them, being proud of them, and also telling them that you are proud of them, telling them that you love them and things like that. These are all very important things that can just bit by bit grow that trust bank account, right? And yes, of course, showing a genuine interest in their daily lives, genuine interest in the things that they are interested in their hobbies, the things that are important to them, and not just only showing an interest in their grades, right? So we want to kind of spread out and really ask about their days and what they're doing, who they're with, which friends are important to them. And that's how we kind of show their interest, right? So second strategy, parental monitoring. And this is a way for us to show an interest in and stay informed of their gaming activities without depriving autonomy, or basically their independence, or their ability to, their sense of at least having some control over their lives, all right? And we can do this by keeping gaming consoles in common areas, putting the computer in the living room or somewhere where you can kind of watch what they're doing, right? This will also kind of make it easier for you to track their gaming behavior, like how many hours they are playing, who they are playing with, what kind of games they are playing, and also quite importantly, how they're communicating with their fellow gamers, right? We can talk to them about the games that they're playing, ask them about what you're trying to achieve in the game, what quest they're on, and maybe even play with them, bond with them over the games that you both play together. Right? So that's another way also we can like combine the parental monitoring and also building up the parent-child relationship. Right? But again, importantly, we want to do this in a way that's supportive or instead of controlling as far as possible. Right? We can agree on media guidelines that are consistent for the whole family, and that includes you. Okay, in this digital age, it's not uncommon for us to be addicted to some sort of digital content, that be that gaming, social media, Instagram, YouTube, or Netflix, or maybe even like K-dramas, right? And remember that children maybe they're not that good at obeying you, but they'll probably be very good at imitating you. All right. So if you are a good role model and you yourself are disciplined towards yourself in managing how much time you spend on your devices, how much time you spend watching the TV, and then when they see you working hard to manage your contact time with these kind of digital things, they will find it easier to model you and listen to you too, right? Secondly, we could negotiate with them for like compromises, right? You ask them for like, hey, just make sure you just keep your gaming to 1 hour a day, and then maybe they might ask for like, but some days can have more, on the weekends can have more. And you can like negotiate with them with this, ask them what they would like, ask them what's important to them, but also letting them know what's important to you. And in that way, we can negotiate, find some kind of compromise that works for you, your child, and the family as well. Okay, we can carry out. And thirdly, we could enforce consequences when the child has violated those rules. Right? When we set these kind of guidelines, we set these kind of rules. We want to stick to them and we want to enforce them, even though we know that's going to make your child feel bad. But it's important that we stick to these consequences so that your child knows that these are boundaries they cannot push. Okay. Fourthly, we want to carry out the digital detoxes, right? Basically, and this is a whole family kind of thing also. It would be much better if we do it as a whole family. Everyone kind of gets offline, spends time together offline, spends the day offline, right? And that includes you as well. And yes, of course, that means some sacrifices on your end, right? But we remember we're doing this in the service of our children because we really care about them, right? And yep, balancing online and offline activities, doing things together with them, finding them activities that they can do offline and spending more time doing those things, right? In some extreme cases, right, outright control, perhaps by like just taking away their computer, taking away or like banning them outright, right, might be necessary, might be needed, especially in very extreme cases where the addiction has become very well set, right? But this should be hopefully one of the last results. And we want to try and do all the other things that we talked about earlier, and some of these things that we'll continue talking about as well. All right. Okay. Now, we want to try to talk to them and understand their why they game, right? Find out whether they feel they're struggling in some of their lives. Again, whether or not your teenager shares things with you openly and honestly really depends on your relationship with them, all right? How close you are to them, how much they trust you, how much they believe that you're trying to support them, right? How much they believe that you are genuinely interested in their well-being, right? So, for example, advancement is the desire to gain power, progress in different levels, accumulate symbols of wealth and status, and this is something that we all want and need. So perhaps children who game in order to get advancement, they might be having difficulty at school, they might be doing badly, and they feel like they aren't advancing in terms of their academics or offline. So they get stuck, they start gaming. And gaming provides us a way to move from like bronze tier, silver tier, gold tier, platinum tier, and things like that. And then as they move up these different kind of ranks and tiers, they start to feel better that this is providing them a way to advance. All right. So mastery, which is basically the need to want to analyze and understand underlying mechanics, rules, systems to optimize performance. And this is something that really gaming provides as well. They give you like systems, or if you do this and this, if you complete this and this quest, you will get this and this skill, right? If you practice this thing, your character will move up in skill, and you start to and they can start to understand the game and really become very good at playing these games. And then of course you're like wondering, I wish they applied themselves outside of the gaming in this way, right? But yeah, so they might be having difficulty doing that offline, and hence they get addicted to the games as a way to get this sense of mastery. Okay. So more kind of possible motivations behind gaming, right? Relationship. Basically, children who are struggling with peer relationships in school, or maybe relationships with their family also, or perhaps they might have social anxiety, kind of difficulty interacting, talking to people offline. They might start gaming as a way to form more meaningful relationships with other people, right? Well, of course, the problem with online relationships is they tend to be more shallow than offline relationships when we're meeting face to face and talking and sharing and seeing each other's kind of expressions and emotions and things like that, right? So escapism, basically gaming as a way to avoid thinking or confronting real life problems, because the gaming provides them a sense of like, it provides them a very immersive environment so that they can escape and not deal with some of these problems. So children or teenagers who are using games as a way to escape might be struggling a little bit with the school, struggling with their peers, struggling with CCAs, and then, or maybe they're struggling with things that are happening in the family, right? And they might perhaps use the games as a way to escape or avoid thinking about those things, right? So thinking about, basically we want to talk to them and find out a little bit about this. Are they gaming because they want to get better? Are they gaming because they want to understand things and feel better about themselves in that way? Are they gaming because their relationships offline are not going well and they want to, gaming provides them a way to connect with other people, right? Or are they gaming as a way to escape from difficulties in their lives? Okay. So these are needs that teenagers have, and honestly, we have as well. Okay, and they have these needs, but they might not always know where best to seek it from, which means they might end up kind of meeting these needs in unhelpful ways from unhelpful kind of places, like gaming, right? And so they need guidance. And this is where you as parents can definitely come in, because once we know what is driving them towards gaming and possibly addiction, right? Parents can then provide alternative ways to meet these needs. And honestly, the possible activities are endless. Like here are some examples. So you could like organize more outdoor family activities with them. We could enroll them, or perhaps you and them in a sport or a martial art, because that, again, that provides them a way to get their advancement and mastery needs met. We can play board games as a family, again, providing that kind of relationship. And then, of course, when they win or lose, it provides them a way to advance and to feel good about themselves. We could introduce them to very immersive books that provide a way for them to escape as well, right? You could introduce them to offline hobbies, volunteering, things like that. I think importantly also, we want to find a way to help them with some of these struggles, right? If they're struggling with their school, okay, we work through that. They're struggling with peer relationships, we talk to them about that, perhaps kind of advise them on how to kind of navigate some of the difficulties, because sometimes secondary school or JC can be quite a scary place socially. I remember things like that happening to me in the past as well, and maybe for yourself as well. So that can be quite a scary thing, and you as parents can definitely help them along with that as you kind of show interest and chat with them about that. Okay, so these are the different strategies that that you parents can definitely work on. And let's talk a little bit about what a psychologist can do, right? And there is definitely psychotherapy, and this is something that you want to do in conjunction with your parenting strategies. It's important that when you bring your child to a psychologist for gaming addiction, it's important that the parents are really involved and really focused on helping their child overcome the gaming addiction as well. And this is something that your psychologist will most likely talk to you about, right? But psychotherapy for gaming addiction will often come in the form of cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT for short, right? Which will focus, and first thing that psychologists doing CBT will focus on adjusting these maladaptive or unhelpful beliefs about gaming, right? So for example, they might have skewed beliefs about how real or how valuable the in-game rewards might be, right? It could be, and so for example, they could be like thinking like the coins or tokens or rewards that they can earn through the game might be really valuable to them, and so hence that's why they keep kind of going back, especially when the gaming companies, they put up advertisements about this great like weapon or skill that they can win through completing the quest. They might have quite rigid rules about their gaming behavior. Perhaps they might be like, I can only stop after I complete a certain quest. But then of course the quests get longer and longer and more complicated, right? They could be over-relying on gaming as a way to meet their self-esteem needs, kind of depending on the gaming to help them feel more confident about themselves as opposed to other important things like their kind of peer relationships, their school, of course, as well, and their CCAs. It could be gaming as a way to gain social acceptance, right? So perhaps thinking that like I need to game in order for my peers to accept me. I need to be playing the same games. I need to be on the same level as them. If not, they're going to mock me, which can sometimes be true also, but we want to get them away from that kind of thinking, because that gets in the way of other goals that are clearly important to them as well. Okay. So talking about, and CBT psychologists will definitely be working on doing things like behavioral experiments or interventions, right? We could start to help the child set more structure around their gaming, right? So kind of setting boundaries around how many hours they game. And this is something that we want to try to work together with the teenagers so that they can agree to some of these boundaries, these kind of structures. If the child is spending a lot of time online because they've got difficulty interacting offline, the CBT psychologist would teach a child and guide a child to learn different social skills like communication skills and things like that lah. All right. We can also definitely help a child to develop their self-efficacy, or basically self-confidence in other domains, offline at school, in their different CCAs or sports or things like that, right? And we can help the child experiment, try out different other activities to meet their needs, okay? So quite importantly, also CBT or CBT psychologists will work together with a child to develop more effective emotion regulation skills. So things like learning mindfulness, learning relaxation, and these are things that we can teach our child to do. Okay, this is my last slide before I move on to the Q&A. But honestly, sometimes as parents, we may tend to like look at all gaming as bad. And it is important that we also acknowledge that children and teenagers, they need to play. They need to have fun with their peers, which same as us adults, we need this. We need to play as well. We need to kind of have fun with our friends. So we need to allow some gaming, right? As long as it does not lead to an addiction or it gets significantly in the way of your child achieving the goals that they, and of course you, want for them. Right? We need to make sure that our children's well-being is maintained so that they are less prone to addiction. And if they do get addicted, if we pay attention to their well-being, it'll be easier for them also to overcome this addiction. again, a big part of that is you staying connected to them, making yourself available as a source of support that they can rely on. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. We're gonna move on to the question and answer section. Goodbye. Oh, hi, Celine.
Hello, Max. For context, we are sitting in the same room.
You're there.
All right, so let's open up the floor to any questions you may have. As usual, just feel free to put them in the chat box below. We do have a question on how would you know when your child is gaming too much? So is there sort of like a threshold or little things to pick up on?
I think the little things to pick up on is basically how much there isn't like a magic number, right? Because what the number might be really depends on the situation that's going on. Like the number will be very different if it's during the school holidays and they don't attend school, no kind of assignments and homeworks. Although nowadays school holidays got a lot of assignments and homeworks as well. But basically it's how much we have to look a little bit more at your child, your individual child, and the context, whether or not it's really starting to interfere or get in the way of them getting the grades that they want, or get in the way of, or perhaps it's leading them to, it's like the gaming becomes their dominant activity in their lives. Right? When you see signs like that, and then when you talk to them about reducing the gaming, they start to argue back with you. That could be signs that your child might be gaming too much, right? So there isn't a magic number, right? But if it starts to be the dominant activity in your child's daily life, daily schedule, then that's definitely something that we want to be more concerned about. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Max. I think the question is that we're just wondering, nowadays a lot of kids have not just games for like fun, but they're also games that are meant to teach children skills, right? Like more educational based games. Do you think that we can be addicted to those kinds of games, and is it necessarily a bad thing?
Okay, that's a really good question actually. Yes, we can get addicted to games. And too much of a good thing is a bad thing, and it's the same thing for educational kind of games, because these educational games they keep your child in the game by providing them rewards, providing them ways to do these kinds of things. But if they're kind of spending a lot of time playing this so-called educational game, and then they're like really good at like whatever the educational game is trying to teach them, but then maybe they're losing contact with their friends offline. Maybe they're not kind of engaged in running around doing sports, and maybe they're less interested in doing other things, but end up spending hours and hours on this educational game. That can be a problem as well. So yes, definitely we can get addicted to these educational games, and whether or not it becomes a bad thing really depends on whether it starts to interfere with other areas of your life, right? Like their relationship with you, how well they're taking care of themselves, their sleep, and their relationships with their friends. Yeah.
Cool. I think that was very helpful. Yes. All right. So I think if that is about it. All right. So we have more or less come to the end of day one of our AKIDS Symposium. Thank you so much to Max for rounding it out with a very interesting and very useful talk.